My nephew handed me an eviction notice and told me he was turning my home into a video game room. He stood on my porch and called me a squatter, confident that he was the new head of the household. He didn't know that I wasn't just his elderly aunt. I was the legal owner of the entire estate. The morning sun in Carlsbad always felt different than anywhere else. It had a way of cutting through the marine layer, warming the stucco walls of my cottage without burning them. I sat on my small patio, a cup of Earl Grey steaming in my hands, listening to the distant hum of the Pacific Ocean. My annex, as I called it, sat about 50 yards behind the main house, separated by a lush garden of birds of paradise and hibiscus. It was quiet. It was mine. At least I thought it was quiet. A heavy thud vibrated through the ground. Then came the bass. It was a rhythmic electronic pounding coming from the main house. My nephew Justin had moved in 3 weeks ago after my brother passed away. Since then, the peace of the estate had evaporated. I took a sip of tea, trying to ignore the noise. I adjusted the silk scarf around my neck. I was 72 years old, and I had lived on this property for 40 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards and every shift in the wind. I did not know the young man currently blasting techno music at 9 a.m. The sliding glass door to my annex rattled. I looked up to see Justin standing there. He didn't knock. He just slid the door open and walked in. He wore a loose t-shirt with a cryptocurrency logo on it, and pajama pants that looked expensive but messy. He held a digital laser measure in his hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at the walls. "Justin," I said, setting my cup down on the saucer. "Good morning. Is everything all right?" He ignored me and pointed the laser at the far wall, where my bookshelf stood. A red dot appeared on the spine of an old legal encyclopedia. The device beeped. 18 feet, he muttered to himself. "Yeah, that works." "Justin," I said a little louder this time. He finally turned. He looked at me like I was a piece of furniture he hadn't noticed before. "Oh, hey Aunt Eleanor. Look, I need you to clear this room out by Friday." I blinked. "Excuse me. This room," he said, gesturing vaguely around my living space. "The lighting in here is actually perfect for the VR setup. I'm turning this whole detached unit into a gaming lounge. The acoustics in the main house are trash for recording." I stared at him, my hands folded calmly in my lap, a habit from my working days. "Justin, this isn't a spare room. This is my home. I live here." He let out a short, dismissive laugh. He walked over to my kitchenette and opened the fridge, peering inside before closing it without taking anything. "Come on, Auntie. You're crashing in the guest house. Dad let you stay here because he was nice, but I'm upgrading the estate. I'm bringing the property value into the 21st century." "You are upgrading the estate?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Yeah, I'm the head of the household now," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. "I need the space. Honestly, this place is wasted on one person. You should look into those communities. You know, the ones with the nurses and the bingo nights? You'd be safer there." My blood ran cold, but I didn't show it. I simply smoothed my skirt. "I am perfectly safe here, Justin. And there are things about this property you do not understand. Things your father and I." "Dad's gone," he cut in sharply. "It's my house now, and I don't want a squatter in my backyard. It's weird for my guests." He tapped the laser measure against his palm. "Friday, Eleanor. Seriously, don't make me make it awkward." He turned and walked out, leaving the sliding door wide open. The cool air rushed in, chilling my tea. I sat there for a long time, watching the hibiscus flowers sway in the breeze. He called me a squatter. He thought I was just an old woman taking up space. I stood up and closed the door. I went to check my email, but the page wouldn't load. I checked the router in the corner. The lights were blinking red. I looked out the window toward the main house. Justin was standing on the back deck, phone in hand, fiddling with a gray box mounted on the wall. He had cut the Wi-Fi extender. I sighed and picked up my purse. I needed to go to the market anyway. I walked out my front door and headed down the paved path toward the driveway. I stopped. A sleek white Tesla was parked directly across the walkway that connected my annex to the street. Completely blocked the path. I would have to walk through the muddy flower bed to get around it. I looked up at the main house. Justin was in the window watching. When he saw me look, he just waved, a smirk playing on his lips. I stepped carefully into the dirt, ruining the shine on my loafers. I walked to my own car, a vintage sedan parked on the street, and drove away. I didn't go to the market. I went to the post office to check my P.O. box, my mind racing with the disrespect, the audacity. When I returned an hour later, a sheriff's deputy was standing at my door. My stomach tightened, but I parked the car and walked up the driveway. The Tesla was still blocking the path, so the deputy was standing awkwardly in the mud. "Ma'am," the deputy said, touching the brim of his hat. He looked young, maybe 30. He looked uncomfortable. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" "I am," I said. "I have some papers for you, ma'am. Served on behalf of Justin Vance." He handed me a thick envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what it was, but I did anyway. The bold letters at the top read, "Notice to quit. Eviction proceedings." I looked past the deputy. Justin was standing on the porch of the main house. He was holding his phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at us. He was filming. "Sorry, Auntie," he shouted, his voice carrying over the garden. "Just strictly business. Gotta clear the lot for the renovation." The deputy shifted his weight. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You have 30 days to respond, or the sheriff comes back to remove you." "I understand," I said softly. "Thank you, deputy. You are just doing your job." "He says you're a tenant at will who hasn't paid rent," the deputy added quietly, lowering his voice. "If you have receipts, you should find them." "I don't have rent receipts," I said. The deputy frowned, looking sympathetic. "Well, you might want to find a lawyer then." "Yes," I said, looking at the paper in my hand, then back at Justin, who was now laughing into his phone, narrating his victory to his followers. "I think a lawyer is exactly what I need." I walked into my annex and locked the door. The bass from the main house started up again, shaking the frames of the pictures on my wall. I placed the eviction notice on my small dining table. It was an insult. It was a threat. But as I stared at Justin's name printed on the legal document, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. He wanted to play a legal game. He had no idea who he was playing against. The sun went down, and the music from the main house finally stopped. The silence returned to the hillside. I locked the front door and pulled the curtains shut. The fabric was thick and blocked out the view of Justin's Tesla still parked across my walkway. I went into the small back room of the annex. It served as my office. A heavy oak desk sat in the corner, covered in neat stacks of gardening magazines and utility bills. I pushed the leather chair aside and knelt on the hardwood floor. My knees made a cracking sound loud in the quiet room. I rolled back the corner of the Persian rug. Underneath, a square steel door was set flush into the floorboards. It was a floor safe installed 30 years ago. I placed my hand on the cold metal dial. I turned it clockwise to 20, counterclockwise to 15, clockwise again to 35. I felt the internal tumblers catch with a solid clunk. I lifted the heavy steel handle and pulled the door open. A smell drifted up from the dark compartment, the scent of dry, stale air and old paper. It smelled like the past. I reached down and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The clasp was rusted, and it left a reddish smear on my thumb. I carried the envelope to the desk and turned on the brass lamp. The yellow light flooded the desktop. I undid the clasp and slid the contents out. There were 2 documents. The first was a grant deed. The paper was slightly yellowed at the edges. At the top, in typewriter font, it read, "Recorded in the official records of San Diego County, May 12, 1985. I ran my finger over the names listed under grantee. There was only one name. Eleanor Vance, a single woman. The second document was thinner. It was a life estate agreement. It was dated 10 years later. It granted my brother, Robert Vance, the right to live in the main residence for the remainder of his natural life. It stated clearly in Section 4. Upon the death of the life tenant, all rights to the property revert immediately to the owner, Eleanor Vance. I sat back in my chair. The paper felt crisp and fragile in my hands. My brother Robert was a good man, but he was bad with money. I bought the house to save him from bankruptcy. I let him live there because he was family. I never told his son, Justin, the details. I assumed Robert would have explained it. Apparently he never did. I reached for the phone on my desk. It was an old landline with a cord. I dialed a number I had memorized decades ago. It rang 4 times. Harrison and Parker, how may I direct your call? A receptionist answered. I would like to speak to Alan Parker, I said. Tell him it is Eleanor Vance. Tell him it is about the Carlsbad estate. There was a pause, then a click. A moment later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. Eleanor? Is that really you? Hello, Alan, I said. It's been 5 years, he said. I heard about Robert. I'm sorry. Thank you, Alan. But I am not calling to catch up. I have a situation. My nephew just served me with an eviction notice. Alan was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low, dry chuckle. He is trying to evict the title holder? Does he have a death wish? He thinks he inherited the estate, I said. He thinks I am just a tenant. I have the original deed right here on my desk. Don't show it to him, Alan said instantly. His voice shifted from friendly to professional. Not yet. Let him file the paperwork. Let him swear under oath that he owns it. Then we walk into court. I want him out, Alan, I said. He is destroying the house. We will get him out, Alan promised. I'll clear my schedule for the hearing. I hung up the phone. I felt a weight lift off my chest. The next 2 days were a test of patience. Justin continued his noise campaign. He bought a drum set and played it in the garage with the door open. He invited friends over who parked their sports cars on my lawn. I watched them from my kitchen window as I washed dishes. They threw beer cans into my rose bushes. On the 3rd afternoon, my phone rang again. The caller ID said Law Offices of Greg Miller. Picked it up. Hello. Yeah, hi, is this Eleanor Vance? The voice was fast and nasal. I could hear typing in the background. This is she. Mrs. Vance, this is Greg Miller. I'm representing your nephew, Justin, in the unlawful detainer case. I see, I said. Look, I'm gonna level with you, he said. He sounded bored. Justin is a nice kid. He doesn't want to throw his aunt out on the street, but he needs the unit. He's willing to offer you a cash for keys deal to save everyone the headache of a trial. I gripped the phone tighter. What is the offer? $5,000, Miller said. Cash. You sign a waiver, you vacate the premises by this weekend, and he gives you $5 grand. That's plenty for a deposit on a senior apartment. Honestly, it's free money. If we go to court, you get evicted and you get nothing. $5,000. The main house alone was worth $3 million. The annex was worth nearly $1 million on its own. The insult was so large it almost made me laugh. Mrs. Vance? You there? I am here, I said calmly. You can tell my nephew that I decline his offer. Listen, lady, Miller sighed. You're gonna lose. You have no lease. You're a squatter. The judge isn't going to have pity on you, just because you're old. I do not want pity, I said. I want the law. Fine, Miller snapped. See you in court on Tuesday. Bring your checkbook for the legal fees. The line went dead. I placed the receiver back on the cradle. Outside, I heard Justin shouting something to his friends. They all laughed. I looked down at the documents on my desk. The afternoon sun hit the gold foil seal on the deed. It shone brightly. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in the envelope. Then I put the envelope in my purse and zipped it shut. I was ready. The North County Superior Court building in Vista was a block of gray concrete and glass. The air conditioning inside was set too high. It chilled my skin through my wool blazer. I walked through the metal detector without beeping. I placed my purse in the plastic gray bin and watched it slide along the rollers into the X-ray machine. I collected my things and walked down the long hallway toward Department 4. The floors were polished terrazzo, speckled with black and white chips. My heels clicked rhythmically on the hard surface. Around me, people argued in hushed tones or sat on wooden benches with their heads in their hands. I saw Alan Parker standing near the double doors of the courtroom. He looked exactly as I remembered, though his hair was completely white now. He wore a charcoal suit that fit perfectly. He held a leather briefcase in his left hand. Eleanor, he said, stepping forward. He took my hand in a firm grip. His palm was warm. Thank you for coming, Alan, I said. I wouldn't miss this, he said. He glanced over my shoulder. Is that him? I turned. Justin was walking out of the elevator. He wore a navy blue suit, but the pants were too long. The fabric bunched up around his sneakers. He wasn't wearing a tie. His lawyer, Greg Miller, walked beside him. Miller was short and carried a messy stack of files under his arm. He looked tired. Justin saw me. He didn't wave this time. He just nodded a quick, jerky motion and looked at his phone. "That is him," I said. "Let's go inside," Alan said. We pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The courtroom smelled of furniture polish and stale coffee. The gallery was mostly empty. We sat at the defendant's table on the right. The wood of the table was scratched and worn. I placed my hands on the surface and waited. Justin and Mr. Miller sat at the plaintiff's table on the left. Justin leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs out until his sneakers were visible under the table. He whispered something to Miller, and Miller shrugged. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. The door behind the bench opened. The judge walked in. She was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She sat down and adjusted her robe. She looked at the docket sheet in front of her. "Case number 34 to 2025. The judge read. "Vance versus Vance. Unlawful detainer." "Ready for the plaintiff, Your Honor," Miller said, standing up. "Ready for the defendant, Your Honor," Alan said, his voice deep and clear. He did not stand up yet. The judge looked over her glasses at Justin, then at me. "Proceed." Miller walked to the podium in the center of the room. He rested his messy stack of files on the wood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward eviction case. The plaintiff, Mr. Justin Vance, is the owner of the property at 440 Highland Drive. The defendant is his aunt. She has been living in the guest unit without a lease and without paying rent. Mr. Vance has asked her to leave so he can renovate the property. She refused. We served the proper 30-day notice. She is still there." Miller turned a page in his file. "We are asking for an order of possession today." The judge looked at Miller. "Does the defendant claim a right to possession?" "She claims she lives there," Miller said. "But she's a family guest. A tenant at will. That tenancy has been terminated." The judge nodded and turned her gaze to the plaintiff's table. "Mr. Vance, do you have anything to add?" Justin stood up. He cleared his throat. He looked nervous for a second, but then he put on a sad, sympathetic face. He looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," Justin said, "I didn't want to do this. I really didn't. Eleanor is my dad's sister. But since my dad passed, things have been difficult." He paused for effect. He looked over at me with pity in his eyes. "She's confused a lot," Justin continued. "She forgets things. She thinks the house is still exactly like it was 20 years ago. It's sad, really. I tried to offer her money to help her move into a nice facility where she can get care. But she got angry. I just want my property back so I can move on with my life. I can't have a squatter in the backyard, even if she is family." I sat perfectly still. I did not frown. I did not shake my head. I watched his mouth move. I watched the way he gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. He was lying to a judge in open court. He was calling me senile to steal my home. The court reporter typed silently on her machine. The only sound was the soft clack-clack-clack of the keys. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," the judge said. She wrote something down on her notepad. Then she looked at the defense table. "Counsel," the judge said to Alan, "does your client have a response?" Alan stood up slowly. He buttoned his suit jacket. He picked up the leather briefcase and set it on the table. The brass latches made a loud snap in the quiet room. "We do, Your Honor," Alan said. "We dispute the plaintiff's claim entirely." "On what grounds?" the judge asked. "Is there a lease?" "No, Your Honor," Alan said. "There is no lease." Justin smirked. He leaned over and whispered to Miller, loud enough for me to hear. "Told you. She's got nothing." Alan ignored him. He reached into his briefcase. "The defendant does not have a lease, Your Honor, because a landlord does not need a lease to live on her own property." The air in the room seemed to stop moving. The court reporter stopped typing. Justin's smile froze on his face. Alan pulled the thick manila envelope from his bag. He held it in both hands. "My client is not a tenant," Alan said, his voice hard and flat. She is the sole title holder of the estate. I looked at the judge. She had stopped writing. She was looking at the envelope in Alan's hands. I looked at Justin. He was staring at me, his eyes wide, the color draining from his face. The pity was gone. Fear was starting to take its place. Alan walked to the center of the room. He moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm. He did not look at Justin or Mr. Miller. He approached the bailiff and held out the documents. "Permission to approach the bench, Your Honor?" Alan asked. "Granted," the judge said. The bailiff took the envelope from Alan and handed it up to the judge. She put on her glasses. She took the documents out and laid them flat on her high desk. The room was silent. I could hear the air conditioner humming in the ceiling vents. Miller stood up, looking confused. "Objection, Your Honor. We haven't seen these documents. This is trial by ambush." "It is a grant deed, counsel," the judge said without looking up. "It is a public record. You could have pulled it from the county recorder's office at any time." She turned the page. The sound of the paper crinkling was sharp and loud. Justin leaned forward. He tapped his lawyer on the arm. "What is she reading?" "What is that?" Miller whispered back, but I couldn't hear the words. He looked pale. The judge finished reading. She looked over the top of her glasses at Justin. Her face was stern. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you stated under oath that you are the owner of the property." "I am," Justin said. He stood up again, smoothing his suit jacket. "My father, Robert Vance, owned the house. He passed away 3 months ago. I am his sole heir. I have his will right here." He pulled a folded, stapled document from his inside pocket and waved it in the air. "Bring it here," the judge said. Justin walked to the bench and handed the will to the bailiff. He walked back to his table and stood there, arms crossed, looking at me. He smirked. He thought this was a battle of paperwork and he thought he had the winning piece. The judge read the will. Then she looked back at the deed Alan had provided. She looked back and forth between the two papers for a long minute. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, "this will states that your father leaves all his assets to you. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Justin said firmly. "Everything. The house, the car, the accounts." "The problem," the judge said, her voice dry, "is that your father did not own the house." Justin froze. "What?" "Counsel," the judge said to Alan, "please explain the chain of title for the record." Alan stood tall. He spoke clearly, his voice filling the room. "My client Eleanor Vance purchased the property in 1985. The deed is in her name. In 1995, she executed a life estate agreement." Alan pointed to the second document on the judge's desk. "This agreement gave Robert Vance the right to occupy the premises during his lifetime," Alan continued. "It conveyed no ownership interest. It was a right of use only. Upon his death, that right extinguished immediately. The property reverted fully to the title holder." He turned and gestured to me. "Eleanor Vance never lost ownership. She simply allowed her brother to live there." Justin looked at Miller. Miller was staring at the table, rubbing his forehead. "That's not true," Justin stammered. That's a lie. My dad lived there for 20 years. He paid the bills. It was his house. Paying utility bills does not grant title," the judge said. She looked at Miller. "Counsel, did you run a title search before filing this eviction?" Miller stood up slowly. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Your Honor, my client assured me he had inherited the property. I relied on his representations." "You relied on a will without checking the deed," the judge said. "It wasn't a question. It was a reprimand." She looked back at Justin. "Mr. Vance, you cannot inherit property that your father did not own. Your father had a life estate. It ended when he died. You inherited his car and his bank accounts. You did not inherit the real estate." Justin's face turned red. He gripped the edge of the table. "But I live there. I moved in. I'm head of the household." "You are a guest," the judge corrected him. "A guest who is trying to evict the owner." I watched Justin. His arrogance was cracking. The reality was hitting him like a physical blow. He looked at the papers in the judge's hand, then he looked at me. For the first time, he didn't look at me like I was a piece of furniture. He looked at me like I was a stranger. He realized he didn't know me at all. He didn't know I had been a paralegal for 40 years before I retired. He didn't know I had saved his father from homelessness twice. He only knew what he wanted to believe, that I was old and therefore I was weak. Your Honor, Allen said. We move to dismiss the plaintiff's case with prejudice. Granted, the judge said instantly. She picked up her gavel. Wait, Justin shouted. You can't just. I live there. Where am I supposed to go? I spent money on renovations. I knocked down a wall in the master bedroom. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He had damaged the house. The judge dropped the gavel. Bang. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice cold. You just admitted to damaging property you do not own. I suggest you sit down and be quiet. She turned to Allen. Mr. Parker, I see you have filed a cross-complaint? Yes, Your Honor, Allen said. For unlawful detainer. We are countersuing for immediate possession of the main residence. The room went very quiet again. Justin sank into his chair. He looked small. The game was over. The laser measures, the loud music, the eviction notice. It all evaporated in the face of the gray, typed text on a piece of paper from 1985. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I had protected my home. But as I looked at my nephew's slumped shoulders, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, heavy sadness. He was family and he had forced me to do this. He had forced me to prove that I still existed. The judge looked at the new file on her desk. It was the folder Allen had submitted that morning. Mr. Parker, she said, proceed with your cross-complaint. Allen buttoned his jacket again. He walked to the podium, leaving the empty envelope on the table. He looked solid and calm. Your Honor, Allen began. My client Eleanor Vance is the legal owner of the property. Mr. Justin Vance entered the premises after his father's death. He did so without the owner's permission. He has since altered the structure of the home, created a nuisance with excessive noise, and attempted to intimidate the owner through fraudulent legal action. Allen paused. He picked up a piece of paper from his file. We served Mr. Justin Vance with a 3-day notice to quit for nuisance and waste 3 days ago, concurrently with our response to his eviction suit. The 3 days have expired. He has not vacated. Justin jumped up. I never got a notice. Allen turned and looked at him. It was posted on your front door and mailed via certified post. We have the affidavit of service from the process server. And, Allen added, his voice dropping a register, we have video footage from your own security camera of you ripping it off the door. Justin's mouth opened, then closed. He sat down hard. Mr. Miller, the judge said, do you have a defense to the cross-complaint? Miller stood up. He looked defeated. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Your Honor, my client has established residency. He has been there for 30 days. He needs reasonable time to relocate. He served an eviction notice on an elderly woman, the judge said sharply. He tried to remove her from her own home in 30 days. He did not seem concerned about reasonable time then. Miller looked down at his shoes. No, Your Honor. The law is clear, the judge said. The title is clear. Mr. Justin Vance has no lease. He pays no rent. He has committed waste by destroying a wall. And he has attempted to defraud this court by claiming ownership he knew, or should have known, he did not possess. She wrote on the paper in front of her. The sound of the pen scratching was loud. Judgment for the cross-complainant Eleanor Vance, she announced. Immediate possession of the premises at 440 Highland Drive. The sheriff will enforce the lockout in 72 hours. She looked directly at Justin. Mr. Vance, you have 3 days to remove your belongings. If you damage 1 more inch of that house, I will hold you in contempt of court. Do you understand? Justin didn't answer. He just stared at the table. Mr. Vance, the judge said louder. Yeah, Justin mumbled. I understand. Court is adjourned. The judge banged the gavel and stood up. She gathered her robes and walked out the back door. The bailiff stood up. All rise. I stood up. My legs felt stiff. Picked up my purse. Allen turned to me and smiled. It was a small professional smile. It is done, he said. We walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights seemed brighter than before. Justin and Miller came out a moment later. Miller shook Justin's hand quickly, muttered something, and walked away toward the elevators without looking back. Justin stood alone in the hallway. He looked at his phone, then put it in his pocket. He looked at me. He walked over. He stopped about 3 feet away. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked shocked. "Auntie," he said. His voice was quiet. "I didn't know. Dad never told me." "You didn't ask," I said. "But, the house," he said. "It's huge. What are you gonna do with it? You can't live in the main house alone. It's too much work." He was still trying. Even now, after the gavel had fallen, he was trying to find an angle. "I will manage," I said. "Look," he said, stepping closer. "Maybe we can work something out. I can pay rent. I can help you fix the wall I took down. We're family, right? You don't really want to kick me out." I looked at his sneakers. I looked at his unkempt suit. I remembered the bass thumping through my floorboards. I remembered the eviction notice. I remembered him filming me for his followers. "Justin," I said, "you tried to evict me. You told the judge I was senile. You cut my internet. It was business," he stammered. "I was just trying to maximize the asset." "Yes," I said. "And now I am maximizing mine." I turned to Alan. "I am ready to go." "Wait," Justin called out as we walked away. "Where am I supposed to go? I leased a condo in downtown, but I sublet it. I don't have a place." I didn't stop. I kept walking, my heels clicking on the floor. I walked out the glass doors and into the bright, hot sun of the parking lot. The air smelled of asphalt and exhaust fumes. Smelled like freedom. "I will meet the sheriff at the property on Friday," Alan said as we reached my car. "You don't have to be there if you don't want to." "I will be there," I said. "I want to inspect the damage to the wall." Alan nodded. He opened my car door for me. I sat in the driver's seat. I watched him walk to his own car. I started the engine. I adjusted the rearview mirror. I could see the courthouse reflected in the glass. It was a big, ugly building. But today it was the most beautiful place on earth. Friday arrived with a heavy gray mist that rolled in off the lagoon. The air was damp. I stood on my porch at 8 a.m. sharp. I wore my gardening coat and sturdy boots. I held a ring of keys in my hand. A white sheriff's department SUV drove up the steep driveway. It parked behind Justin's Tesla, blocking it in. A tall deputy stepped out. He adjusted his belt. "Mrs. Vance," he called out. "Good morning, deputy," I said. I walked down the path to meet him. "We are here to execute the writ of possession," he said. "Is he inside?" "His car is here," I said. We walked to the front door of the main house. The double doors were made of solid mahogany with glass insets. I saw a piece of blue painter's tape stuck to the wood. It held a handwritten note. "Do not ring bell. Recording." The deputy rang the bell. We heard shouting from inside. Then a crash like something heavy falling on wood. A moment later the door yanked open. Justin stood there. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he wore the same sweatpants from 3 days ago. He held a half-packed duffel bag in one hand and a tangle of computer cables in the other. "I'm going, okay?" he snapped at the deputy. "I'm going. I just need more time. The movers canceled on me." "You had 72 hours, son," the deputy said calmly. "You need to vacate the premises immediately." Justin looked at me. "You brought the cops? Seriously? I'm your nephew. I am here to inspect the property," I said. "May I come in?" I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped past him into the foyer. The smell hit me first. It was a mix of stale pizza, energy drinks, and drywall dust. I walked into the living room. My brother had kept this room immaculate. He had antique rugs and a grand piano. The piano was pushed into a corner, covered with a sheet. The rugs were rolled up and shoved against the fireplace. In the center of the room, 3 large folding tables formed a U-shape. They were covered in monitors, microphones, and empty takeout boxes. Black foam squares were glued directly onto the cream-colored wallpaper. I walked past the tables toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom. This was where the structural damage was reported. I stopped. The wall between the hallway and the dining room was gone. Not removed professionally, it was smashed. Ragged pieces of drywall hung from the ceiling. The wooden studs were exposed, rough and splintered. A pile of white dust and broken gypsum sat on the hardwood floor. "I was gonna open up the floor plan," Justin said from behind me. He had followed me in. "It's called an open concept. It adds value." "You used a sledgehammer," I said, looking at the jagged edges. "You didn't pull permits. You didn't hire a contractor. You just smashed it." "I was gonna fix it," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I was gonna make this place worth double. You don't understand vision, Eleanor. You're stuck in the past. You destroyed a load-bearing wall," I said, pointing to the header beam that was now sagging slightly. "And you glued foam to silk wallpaper." The deputy stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, grab your bags. Anything left behind stays with the property owner." Justin scrambled. He ran back to the tables and started throwing expensive-looking cameras and headsets into a plastic bin. He dragged a pile of clothes across the floor. I watched him. He didn't look like a powerful landlord anymore. He looked like a child who had made a mess he couldn't clean up. "Why?" I asked. He stopped packing for a second. He looked at me breathless. "Why what? Why didn't you just ask?" I said. "If you needed a place to stay, if you wanted to be family, why did you try to take it?" He sneered. "Because you're old, Auntie. I thought you wouldn't fight back. I thought you just fade away." "I am still here," I said. He zipped up the last bag. He hoisted a computer tower under one arm and a box of cables under the other. He walked to the front door. "This isn't over," he muttered as he passed me. "I'm gonna sue you for the improvements." "Goodbye, Justin," I said. He walked out to his Tesla. He popped the trunk and threw the equipment inside. It didn't all fit. He had to shove the trunk lid down hard to get it to latch. The deputy watched him from the porch. Justin got into the driver's seat. He revved the engine, even though it was electric, and made no noise. He reversed fast, almost hitting the deputy's SUV, then peeled out of the driveway. The tires screeched on the asphalt. He turned the corner and disappeared. The silence rushed back into the house. It was heavy and sudden. The deputy turned to me. "Do you want me to do a walkthrough with you, ma'am? Check for other damage?" "No thank you, deputy," I said. "I think I need to do this alone." "All right. If you need anything, call the station. We'll file the report on the lockout." He tipped his hat and walked to his vehicle. I listened to his engine start and fade away down the hill. I stood in the center of the ruined living room. A piece of black foam peeled off the wall and fell to the floor with a soft pat. The house felt big and empty. It felt wounded. I walked over to the sliding glass door and opened it. The fresh ocean breeze blew in, chasing away the smell of stale food. I looked out at the garden. My Annex stood there, small and safe and untouched. I looked back at the hole in the wall. It was ugly. It was jagged. But it was my wall. And for the first time in weeks, the only sound in the house was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The cleanup took 2 weeks. I hired a crew to haul away the debris from the living room. They filled a dumpster with the broken drywall, the black acoustic foam, and the cheap plywood tables Justin had left behind. I watched them carry the trash bags down the driveway. The dust settled, and the air in the main house began to clear. I called Mr. Henderson, a contractor I had used for years on my rental properties. He arrived in his truck at 7 a.m. on a Monday. He walked into the living room and looked at the smashed wall. He ran his hand over the splintered wooden studs. "Load-bearing," Henderson said, looking up at the ceiling. "He cut right through the support beam. Can you fix it?" I asked. "Of course," he said. "We'll put in a new header. We'll re-drywall, texture, and paint. It will look like nothing happened." "Good," I said. "Do it." I wrote him a check for the materials. I signed it with a steady hand. It was a lot of money, but it was my money and it was my house. I decided not to move back into the Annex. The main house was too big for one person, but it was mine. I took the master suite upstairs. It had a balcony that overlooked the ocean. I bought new sheets, crisp white cotton with a high thread count. I hired a cleaning service to scrub the bathrooms until the tile shone. But I still had the Annex. It sat in the garden, empty and quiet. Justin had wanted to turn it into a VR gaming lounge. He wanted to fill it with noise and darkness. I had a different idea. I called the carpenter back. I need shelves, I told him. Floor to ceiling. Oh, on every wall. Over the next month I moved my collection. I carried boxes of hardcovers across the garden path. I organized them by genre. Mysteries on the north wall. Biographies on the east. Gardening and legal thrillers on the south. I bought 4 comfortable velvet armchairs and placed them in a circle in the center of the room. I bought a heavy wooden coffee table and placed a ceramic tea set on it. The annex wasn't a bedroom anymore. It was a library. On a Saturday afternoon in late November, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a process server. It wasn't a sheriff. It was my book club. Martha, Susan, and Joyce stood on the porch. Martha held a bottle of wine. Susan held a tray of lemon bars. Eleanor, Martha said, hugging me. We missed you. You said you had family trouble? It is resolved, I said. Come in. I let them through the main house. They gasped when they saw the living room. The wall was repaired. The paint was fresh, a soft warm beige. My brother's antique rugs were unrolled and vacuumed. The piano was uncovered and polished. It looks beautiful, Joyce said. It looks so big. It is, I said. But come out back. I have a surprise. We walked through the sliding glass doors and into the garden. The hibiscus was in full bloom, bright pink and red against the green leaves. I opened the door to the annex. The smell hit us, the scent of old paper, lemon polish, and oak wood. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. The velvet chairs looked inviting. Oh my, Susan whispered. Eleanor, this is perfect. Justin wanted a game room, I said, walking over to the small kitchenette to boil water for tea. He wanted a place to escape reality. I decided to build a place to study it. We sat in the velvet chairs for hours. We drank wine and ate lemon bars. We talked about the book of the month, a historical drama about the royal family. We laughed. The sound of our voices filled the small room, but it wasn't noise. It was life. As the sun began to set, the sky outside turned a deep shade of purple and orange. I looked out the window toward the main house. The lights were on in the living room. It looked warm and welcoming. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. Hey Auntie, I'm staying on a friend's couch in Encinitas. Sucks. Can I come get my surfboards from the garage? I looked at the text. I took a sip of my tea. The Earl Grey was hot and strong. I typed back. The garage is locked. I will leave them on the curb on Tuesday for trash pickup. You may collect them before 6 a.m. I blocked the number. I put the phone back in my pocket. Everything okay, Eleanor? Martha asked. Yes, I said. Everything is exactly where it belongs. I looked around the room. The books lined the walls like soldiers standing guard. The deed was in the safe. The title was clear. I was 72 years old, and I had just won the biggest case of my life without saying a word in anger. I took another bite of a lemon bar. It tasted sweet and tart. So, I said to the group, who wants to pick the book for next month?